You're listening to Just Another Solar Podcast, bringing you the latest news and influential voices from Australia's solar industry. This episode is brought to you by iStore, Australia's leading electrification company. From heat pumps to solar inverters, batteries and EV chargers, iStore connects it all on one smart platform. Check them out at istore.net.au.
All right, welcome back to Just Another Solar Podcast with Luke Beattie. That's me. G'day, Karl Jensen.
Wouldn't be a podcast without a weather report, Luke, and it's a smashing day in Victoria today. It hasn't rained for 6 months, but it's a beautiful sunny day.
Good to hear. And Jess MacPherson.
Hello, how are we? Back in the swing of it again.
How are you coping with the 3-day week?
Oh, it's been a struggle. Actually, it really has. Like, I've been treating today like Friday, and then my to-do list for these 3 days has been pretty insane. But, you know, we just struggle through. We do what we need to do.
Do you feel like you're trying to fit 5 days of work into 3 days?
I feel like I'm trying to fit 7 days of work into 3 days.
Not only that, but like 2 or 3 weeks running, we've had short weeks.
And industry legend Nigel Morris. G'day, Nige.
G'day, team. Good to be here. I am technically one of the millions of Australians, I suspect, who went, oh, man, you'd be mad not to take a few days of leave here. So I've been holidaying and up the coast and not really doing much work at all.
And you still made the podcast.
So always make the podcast.
Now, the last episode was live from the Smart Energy Expo. We had a great time doing that. Lots of interaction and feedback from listeners. So thanks for that. And we survived. It was a lot of fun. But we're back into the fray. We're all in 4 different states, and we've got an excellent guest coming up today. There was one article on Solar Quotes this week, Karl, that you rang me about.
Yeah, so the future. Obviously, we had Finn on the podcast the other day, and we talked about it. It's always great when you talk to someone about something and then they write an article about it a week later and publish it. It was great to see that we're all on the same page. The easiest way to make our homes more efficient is with just simple timers. The more complicated stuff we add, the harder it gets for these things to integrate with multiple different systems. Of course, I'm a big fan of Charge HQ for charging the car, can set thresholds for the amount of renewables on the grid, the cost of energy on the grid is being looked at. So if energy on the grid was expensive for whatever reason, it wouldn't charge the car. But then taking that to the next level and integrating it with Amber, integrating it with heating your house and heating your heat pump and all of these sorts of things can get quite complex and messy, and actually getting everything to work. And backstop thrown in there just for good fun for Nigel to tell us all about again. I'm sure there's some to talk about with that this week. I hear some servers gone offline, people's systems going back to zero export and not coming back, and all the stuff that is making it difficult for people to do business.
It's already happening here as well, Karl, where we've got flexible exports, where it's already an issue of matter of priority for control when it comes to Amber versus SA Power Networks. It's difficult to navigate.
So is this a bit like when I've got a phone call and I've got 2 sets of headphones, I've got Sonos speakers, I've got the car, and I'll be mid-phone call and I just get ripped across to some other Bluetooth device? So is that a fair analogy for when you have a control of an inverter that needs to interact with the grid? You've got charging protocols and you've got all these other devices trying to pull control. Is that a fair analogy, Nige?
Yeah, it's pretty close, but you got to think of Facebook Messenger coming at you and, another chat message coming at you and, emails coming in and different instructions happening all the time. So, yeah, it's kind of like the world we live in now, right, where we've just got multiple streams of information coming at us at a rate of knots and through multiple channels. And that is the challenge and the orchestration of all of that and getting it all right it hasn't been done before. That's what Scotty from Catch always reminds me. He says, Nigel, no one's done this stuff before. It's all new to make all this harmoniously and perfectly work together, and it has challenges at times.
Interestingly, Solar Victoria is reporting that this month there's been more heat pump rebates than there has been solar rebates. So that's how hard it is for the industry. We've just gone, forget it. We'll go and install heat pumps until you guys work it out.
That's wild.
It is totally wild.
all the talk has been around the battery rebate, because we know that battery installs have stalled and they're being deferred. And also a lot of solar installs I'm still hearing are deferred. So there's a few interesting things with this. Number one, we're still banking on a Labor win for this scheme to actually get up. I've been hearing that companies are quoting taking deposits for batteries under the scheme. I think that's quite commonplace. What are you guys hearing out there in the market?
Without putting too fine a point on it, if I look at battery attachment rate for the inverters that we sell, what they were before the announcement was made and what's on the water, and we are only a fairly small fish in a really big pond, I make it at a lot of the big distributors are going to be trying to figure out where to put the batteries that are already on the water, because they probably already run out of space. And there's plenty of people having conversations with the bank because no one can pay for it. We've already had a couple of tight months in the industry with cost of living crisis and so on and so forth, and the industry being well down on what it would normally be doing to this part of the year to date. We've already got the belt tightened a lot, and then now we've stopped a major revenue stream for the industry, which has been installing batteries.
That's true. I was chatting to Dougal Gilman from Fronius, and I haven't fact-checked his figure, but I think he came up with something between $70 to $90 million worth of batteries per month would be required if it ramps up as people are forecasting. Oof. So it's not a perfect figure, but let's say that is the figure that we'll run with. You need to times that by 2.5 to 3, because we're talking for stock to be financed from bill of lading to come on a ship to come to the country. So at any given time, we're talking over $200 million worth of batteries. So no panels, no racking, no boss. This is a thumb in the air figure, but think about it that way. That stock needs to be financed into the Australian market. I have it on very good authority that Sinosure, who manages the credit facilities and insurance for the stock coming into Australia, has halved the credit limits of a lot of Australian importers of solar goods. If we're going to be having massive battery attachment rates, 80% plus.
Yeah, we need 20.
Financing the stock to land it in the country for the demand is going to be challenging. And my prediction is that we're going to have stock shortages, not based on planning, not based on anything else apart from the amount of finance that's required to bring it into the country.
Sinosure is an interesting one because that has a real impact. What is going on with Sinosure, given that there's, risk of them trying to export products into, let's just say, other markets? Australia should be a place where they're loosening their belt a little bit, but maybe...
I think it's the risk profile. So how many companies have we seen fail?
Yeah.
How many defaulted loans or credit facilities have there been with Sinosure? I don't know, but I would suggest that they have moved the risk profile for Australian solar businesses.
They certainly have.
I find it really interesting. I mean, on the back of talking about long weekends and election times in general make it tough for people to make decisions and to go ahead with proposals, and a lot of people dragging the chain and taking their time to make a decision when things don't feel stable. And I don't think that these people would cite any one of those reasons specifically. It's a bit more vibes based than that. But I guess the thing that I've been talking about a fair bit within our team and within other people in the industry of the last week or so is that it's not just battery prices that will go up if this rebate does come into effect or if it doesn't. Like, there's a lot of things that are going to move this year, either way this election goes or that this rebate goes, and things are going to get more expensive no matter what. And it's not just batteries. It will be panels. It might be panels, but it likely will be inverters. The rest of the kit and caboodle, the racking, the everything else that comes into it, that's also going to be in really high demand.
Now, there was a spotlight story on dirty nickel. Liam Bartlett travelled to a nickel factory in Indonesia and showed how dirty it was. But it was interesting to see how the story was framed around this is an EV factory. If you're buying EVs, you're participating in this. Now, at last check, the majority of EVs coming into the country are LFP batteries. There are long-range Teslas, NMC batteries. Karl, what's your take quickly on this story?
Well, all of the Hyundais and Kias have also got NMC batteries, and Porsches and Audis have got NMC batteries. So there are lots of cars that have NMCs, just LFPs are less expensive technology and people want less expensive EVs. So as a result, the EVs that are affordable generally have those LFP batteries. But in terms of the hit piece, it's been smashed to bits by all kinds of news media critique stating exactly what you're saying, Luke. Ultimately, that dirty nickel isn't used in EV batteries. It's used to make stainless steel.
Yeah, stainless steel's everywhere. 70% of all the nickel in the world goes towards stainless steel at the moment. So, I'm with you guys. I think that was an atrocious story. I mean, it was an atrocious story in terms of it was just another example of, industrial scale pollution and corruption and, the worst of humanity on display. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And I don't think anyone would argue with that. Spinning it up to be an EV problem was just a joke. Having said that, Renew Economy's been reporting, and in fact just reported this afternoon, that a Rockhampton-based council had a week or so ago suggested that they weren't going to proceed with a bunch of fast chargers based on that Channel 7 news story, which was just utterly ridiculous. And they had a couple of weeks of argy-bargy and lots of representation from the Electric Vehicle Owners Association and various other people trying to highlight to the council the truth of the story. But nonetheless, yesterday apparently, or today apparently, the Rockhampton Council, in their wisdom, decided that not only did that story highlight the reason why they shouldn't put electric vehicle chargers in Rockhampton to these particular Luddites, but they also decided that, in fact, it warranted investigation into the whole renewable industry because, renewables are bad, apparently.
I did a bit of research this morning. I was trying to find out how much oil Australia uses, and it's actually quite difficult. So if you Google how much oil we use, it's different because now we actually import a whole heap of petrol and diesel as petrol and diesel. We don't refine it here because our refineries are too expensive so actually coming up with a number is pretty difficult. But needless to say, it's well over 1 million barrels a day. I believe in energy made in Australia, and even if that means digging coal out of the ground, it's still better than buying foreign oil.
Energy Made in Australia is the perfect segue for our guest today. Glenn Morelli is the Managing Director of Tindo Solar, Australia's only solar panel manufacturer. With extensive experience in clean energy and manufacturing, Glenn has been a driving force behind reshoring solar production and championing Australian-made quality in the renewable sector. So welcome to the podcast, Glenn.
Thanks, Luke. Great to be here.
I have to say that is, in all of our 82 or 83 episodes, the first time I've scripted an introduction. So,
I feel very privileged.
So there's been a few topics that we've covered off that I'd love to touch on again. But first of all, for those who don't know you, you started with Cool or Cozy in 1994 as an insulation sales rep and took massive leaps to get where you are. Do you want to give us some highlights of the journey or just the stepping stones that got you to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. It's always, great talking about yourself, of course. Everyone loves it. I'll give it a crack. But just even before Cool or Cozy, I started my career in IT. So writing code, software. And I think that was a really good grounding for me because all about writing software is about problem solving a problem with the software itself. But then as you're writing the software, finding the bugs and finding ways to work around. So I think that was a good grounding for business. Yeah, as you said, started at Cool or Cozy, selling home insulation, appointments set in home. So that was the first introduction to sales for me. I didn't know at the time, but I could actually sell okay. I thought I was just a software geek. Did that for a few years, was quite good at it, successful, made some money. Then I went and invested in Subway franchising and opened a couple of stores in Adelaide in its early days in infancy here in Australia. And again, that was a really good grounding for business because it was a very rigid structure. There was something like 15,000 stores around the world. So a franchising model that worked and you stuck to the plan, stuck to the structure and, things just worked and it did. So that taught me a lot about business as well.
Probably my favorite fast food, Glenn. So there you go, freaking chicken. It's great that you can see them making it rather than it being made out the back, and you can see the ingredients. Yep. And
I can vouch for freshness because it was fresh deliveries every day and cutting it fresh every day and things like that. So
and baking your own bread on site.
Yeah, and that was a key piece of marketing from Subway, where just the smell of fresh bread is very attractive for most
Did
people.
we get a Subway sponsorship that I missed, you guys?
No, sorry, I wish. But yeah, no, that was a really good grounding for business. Then I actually came back to, had those couple of stores just being managed, and came back to Cool or Cozy as sales manager. So the position was available. Person who hired me had become ill through a heart condition, and so I jumped in there as sales manager. There was all still the same sales guys that I'd worked with, and so it was a great relationship. I then sort of found out that I was actually good at leading a team and leading people, and got them to sort of be working for me as such. They wanted to keep doing well for me, and we won all sorts of sales awards. Cool or Cozy was a national business. We won all sorts of sales comps and awards, and it was great fun. From there, a couple of years later, decided we were selling our Subway businesses, so I left Cool or Cozy again to just make sure the businesses were in order. And then whilst I'd sold the businesses, did a few other things, and then I saw an ad for the Cool or Cozy business in South Australia for sale. Between me leaving and that ad, they listed on the stock exchange, so ASX listed. People who sort of founded and were running the business had since left, and so it was being managed from Queensland, so the business wasn't being run very well, and with people who didn't have the same level of experience or understanding of the industry. And found out that in talking to friends of mine that still work there, the business was in big decline. And so I managed to pick up a business that I knew very well, knew how it was run well, that now wasn't being run well.
So you took the money from the Subways and you effectively bought Cool or Cozy for South Australia.
Correct. Yeah,
right.
And so reinvested that back into that business, and because it was running poorly, and I bought it, in hindsight, for a song, and did everything I could to make that deal happen, and it did. A number of people had left that business because it was being run poorly, and they were all good people. As soon as they found out that I was back there, I got on the phone to them, and they all came back. And so I had then the old crew back together, turned things around very quickly, and within a month we had turned the corner, running profitably, had the good people back, and it was all upwards from there.
You got
what
the
a
band
great
back
story,
together.
Glenn. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
The plot thickens. So then Cool or Cozy got into solar PV.
Yeah, well, firstly, we got into hot water. We're actually doing a fair bit of hot water, because if you think about insulation, it's all about energy efficiency, and solar hot water seemed like a natural progression. But then the Rudd government introduced the home insulation program, if you remember.
Pink Bat scheme.
Yeah, the Pink Bat scheme. So that just attracted a lot of new entrants to the industry that had really no idea. There was no safety measures in place from the home insulation program. And unfortunately, as most people would know, there were some fatalities within that program, and that caused the premature stopping of the program 12 months in, for a program that was meant to go 4 years and had $4 billion allocated to it and all sorts. We were told, oh, don't worry, it's going to come back in a different form. Well, it never came back. And so that forced me to do something else. It was either just close the doors, couldn't even give insulation away, let alone try and sell it anymore. The industry was really damaged. So I decided...
That's a real shame, isn't it, Glenn? Because we know that Australia's got 5 million one-star rated homes or less. Yeah. And, of course, from an energy efficiency point of view, insulation's step one or step zero, right?
Yeah, it was very detrimental to the industry. It took at least 10 years to recover.
So your business was in a position where you'd invested so heavily into... almost relying on that scheme so that you could do the right thing by the mums and dads of Australia, etc.
Correct.
And you guys were kind of left in the cold.
Yeah, so our business went 12 months, went fivefold. So huge growth. The good side was we made a lot of money in a short period of time, but the bad side was when it stopped, I now, instead of having 3 installation trucks, I now had 13, of which I still had to pay for. I had invested in other plant and equipment. I had now, grew a business from about 25 people to about 75 people. So tripled the workforce. All of this that now I had to do something with. I had stock on water, all sorts of things. And suddenly we had no income, and I got a phone call at 3:00 one Friday afternoon saying anything that's not installed by 5:00 Friday afternoon, you're not going to get paid for. I had over 1,000 contract sales that have been made that we couldn't install. And so all that money spent on customer acquisition as well just went down the tubes.
No wonder you're so calm on the solar coaster, Glenn. It all makes sense to me now.
Mate, I'd been on the solar coaster before the solar coaster existed, so to speak. But it teaches you things. It teaches you resilience and, how to mitigate those risks and all sorts of things in business. So it's all a learning curve. But I was forced to either just shut the doors, sack everybody, take my money that I had and do something else, or repurpose the Cool or Cozy brand into something else. And we had a business that had been established since 1984. And this home insulation program happened in 2010. So a long-established business with a massive customer database. And so I decided, let's turn ourselves into a solar business and leverage our database and leverage our customers. Did that not knowing anything about PV. Timing is everything, I guess. I was lucky with the timing with the home insulation program. When I bought the business in 2007, and then the home insulation program started in 2009. And then 2010, we're now a solar business just by name. That's all I had to do. Got a builder's license to reflect that, and started selling solar. Didn't know anything about it. Sent one of my best salesmen off to work for, he saw a job in the paper for another company, shall remain nameless because they're still in existence. And I said, go get a job with them, learn everything you can about solar and how to sell it. And then when I'm ready to start, will you come back? As, yeah, of course I will. And so we got a lot of IP that way. And we just started generating leads and marketing back to our existing customers, and found it just took off for us.
There was a premium feed-in tariff in South Australia then, yeah, Glenn?
Yeah, hadn't quite started, but shortly after.
It was still until about mid-2012. I think maybe some 2013 installs, maybe. But yeah, it was a pretty short window for Glenn's purposes, by the sounds of things.
I think by 2012, based on STC creations, we were the largest installer in South Australia. So within a couple of years, business just went crazy. So I'm happy to share that I bought a small insulation business that turned over a couple of $1 million. And then within, we five-folded that in 12 months to a $10 million turnover of insulation. And then turned that from a zero revenue solar business into a $30+ million solar business in 12 months.
Wow.
So it was a crazy ride. In 2011, I founded another business called Solar Rental Company. So what I found was, there was a lot of government intervention into solar, subsidies, STC multipliers coming off, and all sorts of things that was creating a solar coaster, boom or bust type environment. And it was really hard to have a business based on that. I did a bit of research. There was very little finance offerings for solar at the time. Solar was expensive, so it was hard. So I wanted to come up with a system that we could sell solar no matter what the government was doing, and so finance was what I landed on. So I got a license, ASIC license as a lender, and created our own finance business. And I was using, reinvesting all the profits into that. And within a few years, we had it was all self-funded. So by 2016, I had a finance business with a $20+ million runoff of revenue. And then come along 2016, we won a tender with the state government to install solar on public housing. That program was launched by the then Premier, and it happened to be launched with a press conference at the Tindo factory. So I sort of had a fairly good idea what they wanted to do, and so I approached Tindo. And,
wait, just at this point, though, with Cool or Cozy, were you installing the Tindo panels at that point?
No, we had no relationship with Tindo. They were the arch enemy.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I saw that the government wanted to use locally manufactured panels, and so I approached Tindo just to be a client and get pricing and buy panels, of which we did, and we won the tender and installed, a lot of systems on public housing with Tindo panels. But that was just the introduction to the brand, and got to know Adrian, the then owner and founder of the business. We just got talking, and he was looking for something different to do. He'd done all the hard yards. You can imagine how hard from zero to setting up a solar manufacturing business in Australia at the time. Done a lot of hard yards. He was just, I think, a bit tired and worn out. And for me, it was timing and opportunity to, I guess, buy my supply chain. I always believed in, Australian manufacturing. Being a manufacturer at Cool or Cozy, that was a manufacturing business. in sales, I'm always looking for some uniqueness. You know, what can we do that's different to the competitors that has value? And so I saw great value in being an Australian manufacturer and offering that to the market of what was already proven to be a high quality product.
Vertical integration.
Yeah, that's it.
But easier said than done, because 99% of solar panels coming into Australia are imported, predominantly from China. It sounds like a really, really hard thing to do to get it off the ground. So Adrian did really well to do that, but then to build it beyond where he had built it and to get some scale going, I think in terms of pricing, in terms of labour costs, in terms of overheads, you would think that it's not advantageous to be an Australian manufacturer versus cheap imports. So what are the advantages of being an Australian manufacturer of panels?
Well, our value proposition, I won't say it's unique, it's about quality, longevity, durability. You know, we've been proven over and over by various sources to be very high quality and dare I say it, better than a lot of the modules that come into the country from everywhere, not just China, but from all over the world. We're local, we have a warranty under Australian law and Australian conditions. If you don't like what we're doing, you can rock up here at Mawson Lakes and throw a rock on our roof or eggs through the window or
Going back in time, we did have Rich Pedersen, your CEO of Tindo, and he said a similar thing. He said, you know, the difference with us is if someone's upset at me, they can come down, knock on my door and tell me.
Reputation is really hard to earn, a good reputation, but really easy to lose. And so we're very conscious every day of just doing the right thing, looking after the customers, making sure we're not missing a beat. We've got a manufacturing manager, our chief engineer, who come from QCell. We're lucky enough to recruit him or poach him from QCell about 11 years ago, and he was running the factory in South Korea. He'd been doing that for about 10 years, and he's been at Tindo now for over 10 years. So amazing amount of experience, and excuse the term, but he's just a quality Nazi. And so nothing leaves our factory that's just not perfect. From an owner's perspective, that's amazing. You know, I can sleep at night. I don't have any issues around, we're going to have a product recall, we've got a bad batch or anything like that. It's really comforting to have him there.
Can I ask, Glenn, around taking care of your customers? This might be a bit of a pointy one, which I hope you don't mind, but how do you feel in terms of, you know, trying to take care of the retailers that are buying panels from you versus the end customers that you sell directly to, and, you know, that kind of managing the not quite conflict of interest, that might be a bit dramatic of a term, but, you know, the rub there?
No, I fully understand that. So about 12 months ago, we integrated a new distribution strategy, and part of that strategy was we're only direct to market in South Australia. So we only install in South Australia to mums and dads and whoever. The rest we distribute. So we got rid of that conflict of interest, if you like. The only time we'll ever install interstate is if there's a national contract that we've won because they've come to us directly. We want to deal direct with Tindo, and we've got a couple of those, and that's it. We're just doing rollouts for those national businesses, and the rest we just don't touch. So we are distributing leads to our partners all over the country every day of the week. So we've taken away that conflict of interest, as you called it.
Aside from SA.
Well, we don't sell to anyone in SA. So we distribute nationally apart from SA. So still there's no conflict. And we do get SA businesses knocking on our door, oh, can we buy your panels? And hey, unfortunately, it's no.
I think though, like, you've got to draw the line in the sand somewhere. And I think that's a pretty fair place to draw it. So,
but what it does for us as a manufacturer, it's very unique that we now have both sides of the coin, so to speak. Where a manufacturer, we're also an installer. There's no other solar panel manufacturer in Australia that has that. We understand what our customers, being the other solar installers interstate, are going through. We understand all the difficulties and the pain points. We have got our own IP around how we sell our product, what the key benefits, and we can share that IP with our resellers as well. And so we offer a lot of training in that space. So, we add a lot of value as well because we're actually doing it.
All right, Glenn, the government has passed the Future Made in Australia bill, which I think the number next to it was $60 billion, with a generous amount allocated to various renewable causes. And Chris Bowen said that he believes we can have a self-sustaining local solar manufacturing industry in 10 years. In the context of building a local supply chain, How possible do you think that is?
Oh, I think it's very possible. We're doing it now. So at Tindo, there's roughly 16 components in a solar panel, and we've already onshored 2 of those to local supply chains. So we've got a deal. We've signed a contract with Capral to manufacture our aluminium frame. We've also recently signed a contract, and we've placed our first order with a Melbourne-based company, Morelli, and they're manufacturing our junction boxes. So we're just picking them off one at a time and moving through. We've got a signed MOU with a company that want to manufacture cells in Australia. Now, that's very long term, of course. It's probably going to take 5 to 10 years to happen, but you've got to start somewhere. And there's certainly suppliers in Australia that can make the back sheets and other materials that
so
we
that's
can use
something
as well.
that Tindo's actively seeking out, upstream
100%,
component supplies.
100%.
Someone mentioned the other day 90-something% of solar panel technologies have been invented by Australians.
Yeah.
And it's like, what the hell? That's a huge number, and yet we're not building anything other than what you're building.
That's right. Well, the PERC cell was invented at UNSW way back, and we just sold off the IP or lost the IP to China, and we all know what happened. Part of the federal government's focus is to hang on to that IP and bring it back and have the supply chain. If you think about it, in these uncertain times in the world, who knows what's going to happen? We've got ships circling us and all sorts of things happening in the world.
And tariffs.
Tariffs. Yeah. And we've got this guy called Trump doing things. We need to have some level of self-sufficiency. If we're going to continue to try and meet CO2 targets and renewable energy targets, it's going to be pretty difficult if someone turns off a tap of finished product coming into the country.
I'm not a scientist, but I feel that we need to be doing something.
Yeah.
As a reference. But the other thing that's come up, and this is really a tangent and not related to your roadmap and what you're currently doing, is also diversifying supply chains. And yes. I know the Smart Energy Council led a delegation to India, which our esteemed Nigel Morris was on, which was all part of that.
Obviously, there's some of our materials just have to come from China. There's no choice. But in the last, I'd say 12 months to 24 months, we've been able to, if you like, dehinge from China, and a lot of our materials now come from other countries around the world.
I actually read an article recently that said that approximately 10% of China's GDP is now tied to renewable products.
Not surprising, I wouldn't have thought. And a lot of that's funded by STCs.
I got to know, Glenn, obviously glass is pretty fancy for a solar panel, but
yeah.
How do you get glass for a solar panel here? I mean, if you filled up a 40-foot container of the stuff, it'd have to weigh 200 tons, wouldn't it?
Well, I don't know. We can't import a full container because it does weigh too much. So, so the containers come in. We have to just buy it in 20-foot containers. 20 foot's pretty full. A lot of people would think that, surely we could make the glass here in Australia. We can't at the moment. There's no factory in Australia that could make a 3.2 mil, tempered, low ion, non-reflective glass. It's just not the technology or plant here to do it, and requires a lot of investment. One of the good things that's happened with the Solar Sunshot program and us wanting to scale up and build a gigafactory is it's now attracting suppliers like glass manufacturers to say, well, your scale is going to be that much bigger now. We are interested in talking to you because you're going to have the scale. If we can lock away those orders, we may be prepared to invest. And that's what happened with Capral. Up until Sunshot, Capral weren't interested in supplying us. When that came along and we made it clear what our plans were, they wanted to get on board in the early stages, supply us now while we're in world terms still a small manufacturer, but building to something much bigger.
What do you feel like is the next big thing? There's a few cell types that are hinging around. REC's had the heterojunction for a minute. We've got ACO's ABC cells. Like, where do you think the next thing is?
That's probably a question for someone else in the business and not me, because I'm not that tech head anymore. But in talking to my engineers here, they still believe that they're very cautious of those other technologies. In their words, not mine, unproven. They're relatively new. They've got some concerns about the longevity around them, and that's documented publicly in papers and whatnot that you can find. So they're quite happy right now with an N-type mono or bifacial solution, and they believe that's going to be the mainstream for a little while yet.
Because we did see a trend towards even the shingled modules.
Yeah.
And I always had that question. I think it was we had SunPower in here and we were talking to them about it. And I said, wait a second. So we've got a conductive adhesive between each of the shingles. So they cut a cell into 5 slivers, put a conductive adhesive to join all the cells together in one big row down there. And they weren't in the panels for 25 years or whatever the number is. And you go, wait a second. So we've got a conductive adhesive that I'm not sure has been in the field for 2 years, let alone 25 years.
Yep.
And we've seen a trend away from the shingle modules. The consensus seems to be that TopCon is the current one that they're going with and the current technology. But I remember when we went to the mono perk cells over the poly cells, and everyone was saying, this is the future. We're going to be doing these mono perk cells. This is the mainstream. This is the next 20 years.
At the time, Luke, you were the king of the REC poly half cell panel.
Sure, I was. But then fast forward 8 years, 7 or 8 years, and you go, right, we're talking about completely different cells whatsoever. How do you go keep in pace with it but not running ahead of it?
Yeah, we can't afford to run ahead. You know, we don't have an R&D team of 2,000 people with unlimited budgets. So we can't afford to be at that real pointy end. We just need to sit just behind and follow the leaders on what we think is the best bet based on experience and what we can find out from that product and the industry and who's done the research, etc. We're not technology creators, we're technology followers, but just behind the leaders. One thing that I can say we're looking at and spending time and money, and we've got a relationship with a company who are doing a lot of R&D in this space, is perovskite. So we believe there may be something in that, as a lot of people do around the world, and like a tandem layered perovskite.
Yeah, I think they're testing at like 40,
and
43, 44% efficiency I've seen in the lab.
That's right. The issue with perovskite is its longevity. So we're actually doing some R&D around that with a company to, and we've got some funding from Arena to do it, to tandem layer perovskite, but it be a layer that can be replaced quite cheaply and efficiently as well. So if it does have longevity concerns, you know, it peels off or comes off after 10 years and you put another layer on that by 10 years' time will probably be much better as well.
Another potentially curly one for you, Glenn, is my reputation to stir the pot. So we talked earlier around comparing panels in the market in terms of like from a stats perspective, but to think of it from a price perspective, how are you guys feeling with REC sort of really pulling back in the Australian market in terms of like, you know, pretty well the majority of your competitors all sit at a much more similar price point to each other. And then you guys kind of sit a bit above now with not much higher above you anymore, I would think.
It's interesting, you know, if you look at QCell, which are another one that, you know, we're in that sort of space and left, I think they lost their, what made them successful in Australia, they lost that identity with manufacturing other than China, in whether it be Singapore or wherever. And then they started doing all their manufacturing in China and just became another Chinese solar panel being imported into the country. And it lost that value proposition a bit. With REC, as to why they've decided to really scale back, and who knows, I don't know the reasons, but we see it as a massive opportunity. We've already picked up a lot of customers, wholesale customers.
To be that kind of premium part of the market.
That's right. And our price point is coming down all the time. And that's through efficiencies. And if we spoke about the Sunshot program a little earlier, that part of that is to help us drive volume to create more efficiencies as well. And hence, you know, it's that vicious circle to bring our price point down. We've got to sell more to be able to sell cheaper, but we've got to sell cheaper to be able to sell more. So we're in that cycle at the moment. You could go to any of our distributors, which is Trade Zone, AC Solar and Green Tech, and pick our panels up in probably around mid-40s. It definitely starts with a 4 at the moment. And our goal was to really bring that down. And, we're never going to be at a run-of-the-mill Chinese price that it is at the moment. And there's reasons for that. And one of the reasons is, well, that's actually below cost. You know, we see all the Chinese companies losing a lot of money
There were a lot less of them at the conference.
Yeah.
Last week, but it was the other week now, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And interestingly, SunPower sat comfortably above you with their Maxium products.
Yep.
And even with their Chinese manufactured products. And we've seen TCL acquire a majority stake in SunPower.
Yep.
And now we're seeing a pivot in market strategy more being towards Chinese manufacturing and bringing the price in line with all of those SMSLs and the ones that Jess was referring to. So that's interesting. I'm going to keep it moving. We haven't got heaps of time left, but there was recently, Choice Magazine ran a blind testing of solar modules.
Yeah, they did. They released the results in November last year, so only a few months ago now. They tested 54 modules that they randomly procured from the distribution channels. So it was a true blind test. And that was across 18 different manufacturers and all the normal manufacturers that you would think of in Australia. There was only one manufacturer, one panel that actually flashed or tested at its power class. And that was Tindo, yeah.
It'd be really funny if you said it was someone else. It wasn't.
Oh, that would be funny, yeah. And so if you think about that, and it's always one of our things, like I said, about I sleep comfortably at night because of what we do and the way we do it and the quality. Part of that is delivering on our promises. So if we promise to make a 440 watt module, well, you're going to get that, and we operate to a plus tolerance. Unfortunately, what Choice found that I guess not everyone's in the same boat. And
because I think that's what, a 5% allowance, positive and negative tolerance. Is that correct?
Each manufacturer can dictate what their tolerance is, and then that's their data sheet, and then you've got to stick to the data sheet. So some are plus minus, we're only plus. So if we're making a 440 watt module, if it doesn't flash above 440 when we're testing the product at the end of the manufacturing line, we do not sell it. There is zero tolerance to that. And then the way we package and distribute our product, it's done really well. There's never any breakage. There's never any stress on the panels. And so they're in the distribution channel exactly the same way they left our factory.
Way back in the day, Glenn, we used to get containers of 180, 185 watt panels. And of course, it'd be full of pallets of panels. And then there would be like half a dozen panels on top of the pallets in individual boxes. And I said to the boss, what's going on with these? I said, they're all flashing under. And we buy X number of 100 kilowatts in a container. So the only way they can make it up is by chucking in the additional modules. And I'm like, we can't even receive them in our system because they don't technically exist. They're just in the container to make up the watts that are short on the panels that we bought based on the flash test. So they ended up on my roof.
Yeah, it sounds like it's been going on for a long time then.
I'm really surprised. I would have thought that everything was positive tolerance these days, and I'm genuinely shocked.
So if you look at Choice results, you'll be surprised at some of them. There was one panel there, I think it was a 440, and it flashed at 417. That's pretty poor. A lot of variance, yeah.
Tripping off the STC scheme at that, surely.
Exactly. So you're buying a 6.6 that's not even close and never going to get to it, and then claiming the STCs based on a 6.6.
Well, I think it's a really interesting point because of, panels are always oversized to inverters these days. So it's pretty hard to detect and, who actually gets value out of a performance guarantee or a performance warranty if you can't see it.
Underperforming day one, yeah. Imagine, I said this to people internally, I said, imagine if you went to the supermarket and you bought a 200-gram block of Cadbury chocolate, and then you got it home and it weighed 190 grams. It'd be the front page of every paper in Australia.
But I think it's a really good point because, as somebody who is running a solar retailing business and is maybe considering using your panels, like end of the day, if you're going to have a whole bunch of customers come back to you and say, our system's not performing how it should because the panels are well under the 440 watts that you told me they were going to be, even if you do get good support from your manufacturer, it's still a lot of time. It's a lot of truck rolls just to take care of all these warranty claims and things like that. And it's important that people are getting what they think they're getting or better, right? Who's going to be upset if their 440 watt panel produces 445 or whatever it flashes at?
Well, when the testing was done, so it was early last year when they actually got the panels and then did the testing, then released the results later in the year, they picked up from us 410 watt modules that were in the distribution channel, and they flashed at 417 is what they reported. So well above power class. So that's something we're pretty proud of. So the upshot of that, and there was lots of other tests they went through to qualify it, but they rated Tindo as the best panel available that they tested. And that's from choice. That's the third time that we've achieved that accolade. So we're very proud of that.
Stick it in the pool room, Glenn.
That's huge.
Yeah. And the tests were done by PV Lab, someone with credibility as well. Previously, they were done by CSIRO in Newcastle. So that's part of that third-party validation that I spoke about earlier.
I'm going to ask a almost personal question.
Mm-hmm.
What would you like your legacy to be in the industry?
Oh, that is a good question. Thanks for the warning on that one. I think
you get much better reactions when you don't give prior warning.
If I was old and wrinkly like Nigel and sitting back in my rocking chair, sitting back in my rocking chair, and if I looked and saw that there was, this Australian industry of PV and solar panel manufacturing, and it might be battery manufacturing, and there might be, all the related industries. If I saw that, and there's all the companies supplying that were all here as well, the supply chains, I think that would be a great legacy. Jobs for our kids, tech, high-paid jobs, skilled manufacturing, and self-sufficiency for the country. I think that would be pretty cool.
Now, before we wrap up, I'm going to whip around, get last thoughts and comments. We'll start with you, Nige.
Well, I've been on holiday, so I'm just going to talk about what I've seen on the TikToks. Because
sitting in your rocking chair, hey?
Yeah, that's right. No, I want to give a shout out to actually Luke Donkin, who is a comedian on Instagram, who does some hilarious stuff about being a dad mostly. But he's jumped on the solar bandwagon recently, and he's got a whole series of really hilarious solar-related comedy on the TikToks.
Is this the one Longy posted?
Yeah.
So good.
So good. Yeah. He's done several of them. So that's been the highlight of my holiday week.
Last comments, Karl.
See a conference coming up in a week or two down in Lorne. I guess I'll be seeing Nigel there with some luck.
I'll be there.
Awesome. So looking forward to that one. Yeah, just the politics in the forums. There still seems to be a lot of support for nuclear, which is really scary. Really don't like the idea of every working Australian coughing up somewhere between 30 and 45 grand for a nuclear reactor that our grandkids have got to clean up in 100 years. I think it's a problem with boomers. That's going to be controversial, but there's lots of these people, including my dad, who thinks that nuclear is the way to go, and they're going to vote for it. Keep out there for our industry and keep telling people to not vote for Dutton.
Last comments, Jess?
Yeah, somehow I'm with Karl on this one. No, no, I agree. I've seen, I've seen Dutton backflipping on quite a few things, including EV tax breaks and bits and bobs like that. So it's just like a really important time to make sure that you're up to date, because things are just changing so fast. And hopefully in a few weeks, we will see what we want to see.
And Glenn Morelli from Tindo Solar, thanks for joining us, and really inspiring to hear your story from the starting point and to see what you've achieved, and also to see the vision of where you'd like to see Tindo and Australian manufacturing as a whole.
From subway to solar.
Yeah.
Amazing. There's the title. Thank you, Jess. Glenn, any last comments before we wrap it up?
Oh, I'm not going to be political at all. But what I would say is if there's anyone listening to this that has a solar business, a solar retailer, using a high-quality product like Tindo, you can de-risk your business, de-risk it from a product failure perspective and, all the warranty and costs and bad will that are associated with that, but also de-risk it from a profitability perspective and take yourself out of that fighting for the last cent and that race to the bottom that a lot of people are in, and how cheap can we sell. Separate yourself from that and hold a margin is what I would suggest.
Yeah,
the invoice is in the mail.
The funny part about this is, Glenn, my solar system's only 3 years old, and I paid 40 cents a watt for my panels, so I can't see any reason why that's an unreasonable thing to spend these days. It's cheap.
Yeah, we go back 2 years, and Chinese panels were costing more than what Tindo panels cost now, and everyone was happy to buy them then.
Yeah.
Well,
thanks. Another one of those episodes, Luke, where I'm blown away that you've managed to get such an awesome guest.
Well, that's Nigel. Thanks, Nigel. I can say that Glenn and I have had a conversation around networking a few times in the last 12 months, I think, and we've been threatening to do this. So thanks for coming on again. And of course, thanks to you listeners. Don't forget to interact with us online, like, subscribe, share. If you've got someone else in the industry who wants to get a burst of industry news and to bring themselves up to speed, please share the link, and we'll catch you next time.